In 2017, the government rolled out a new program that sought to grow the contribution of manufacturing to GDP from 9% to 15% by the year 2022. This was to involve stakeholders' participation from the public as well as the private sector. Well, we're now in 2022. Have we managed to achieve this aspiration? This week on Inside Government, we want to look at industrialization, the hits and the misses. We're joined by Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade. This is Ambassador Kaberia Keremi. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
This week's episode of Inside Government. When you look at the last 5 years, what conclusions do you make in terms of making policies and steps towards making Kenya an industrialized nation?
Thank you very much, O'Brien, for having me again. It's always a pleasure to have this opportunity to be in your show, but even more importantly, to reach out to the many Kenyans and to try and explain this journey and where we have reached. I'm happy to say that in the last 5 years, we have seen a tremendous expansion in the footprint of industry in the country, albeit at different levels, but even comparing ourselves to other players globally, Kenya has actually made a very good stride in the last 5 years. If you look at areas of iron and steel, Kenya has really grown. We have moved from the traditional blacksmith to Juakali, from Juakali. Now we have a lot of different small to medium-sized enterprises that produce the regular consumables, the nails, the fencing, the roofing, and such material all over the country. Before, it would take you a lot of time to find these things because most of the production was centralized. This because of both technology transfer and also access due to policy support to the appropriate machinery. A lot has changed. Through the Big Four agenda, there was the uplifting of small to medium-sized enterprises to a point where we were able to actually see more and more cottage industry developing in rural areas. As is right now, and looking at even the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, I think there is now the launch pad is ready for takeoff, especially for industry, because small to medium-sized enterprises have a very, very significant part of that manifesto.
Are there companies that you can point at and say, in the last 5 years, these companies have come because of our deliberate efforts to increase the manufacturing base in Kenya?
Without naming actual companies, I could say if you look at, let's take an area like nail manufacturing. Today, you can go to Nakuru and find one. You can go to Kisii and find one. You can go to Meru and find one. The same with mabati rolling. You will find this happening in so many other smaller towns and municipalities that they didn't exist prior to 2017, for instance. You will also find in other areas like agro-processing, we have so many companies that are aligning themselves to government-led negotiations. For instance, Kenya will go and negotiate with China on avocado. Certain companies will grow to process avocado for that market. The same with coffee, with macadamia, with other agricultural products. If you go to a place like Timao, on your way from Nanyuki to Meru, you will see along that drive on both sides of the road many mega farms, some with many greenhouses, but also fully fledged processing plants, integrated processing there. Products that leave those farms go directly to the shelves of many other countries around the world. And this is all because of the effort that has been put by government on creating the right policies. If you look at what has happened with the new government, they have stated very carefully that the small to medium-sized enterprises will be given that push, that support, so that they are able also to produce to standard for the sake of reaching out to these markets and growing even the local base and their own outreach.
And when you look at this industrialization strategy, which was launched by your ministry, it talks about, attracting big ticket players, large manufacturers, because the companies that you're talking about would be classified by global standards, as small manufacturers. And when you look at even at our peak power consumption, we're still talking about less than 3,000 megawatts. What is the best sign that, Kenya is emerging as a big player on the African continent? Because we wouldn't want to talk about the global front.
First, before we even get there, look at who is courting us, who is coming into Kenya. Japan has chosen Kenya as their main place in Africa. Today, Japan is one of our biggest, if not the biggest, FDI country. If you see the kind of support and push that is coming here from the American manufacturers is huge. Not only producing for here, but even producing here for themselves. If you look at green energy, it's a mega attraction. Now, has it rolled out completely? No. Is it in the process? Yes. Watch this space. It's loading. And what's loading for Kenya is bigger than we have ever imagined in terms of industrialization. And with Dongo Kundu, for example, once we finish that green energy program, I think the sky is the limit.
When you look at, when the Big Four agenda was rolled out, the whole plan was to ensure that we push the contribution of manufacturing to GDP from back then it was 9.5% to about 15% by the year 2022. We're now in the year 2022. Have we managed to realize this dream?
We haven't. I'll be the first to say we have not reached 15% contribution to GDP because of the interruption of COVID. And that affected the whole world. It's not just Kenya. If you see the inflation and the kind of challenges that countries are faced with in Kenya, we're actually doing quite well. We're not as badly hit as we have seen in many other economies.
Where are we?
We are at about 7.5 to 7.9, depending on which formula you use. However, this could have been a lot worse. For 2.5 years, production was almost at zero. Everybody shut down. The world, the logistics community completely moved to hiding, if you can say that. And with that effect, we have seen many countries pull backwards.
So it's proper to say that the growth of the manufacturing sector in the last 2 years has been negative.
Has been slow because it was initially negative, and now it has again leapfrogged strongly. Our building back has been very strong, and we've seen very, very good growth in the last 3 quarters. Yet the other 4 quarters before were really, really hard on us. So I wouldn't say it is entirely negative, because with COVID we went backwards, and then with the mitigation that was put in place, we've now come back and we're growing even faster than we did.
I know one of the issues that manufacturers have decried over the years was the quality and the quantity of energy. And in the last 1 year, we have seen deliberate efforts by the government to try and lower, power tariffs. In January this year, there was a 15% reduction. Another 15% was supposed to come. And I know you have been having conversations with both the manufacturers as well as the Ministry of Energy. Do we have any indication as to when the next lowering is supposed to take place?
I think right now we are looking at the entire economy and trying to figure out the right points of intervention to re-energize growth. But even from the already existing position, you've seen we give huge incentives within the energy sector for manufacturers. Yeah, a manufacturer, for example, in certain areas, if you go through the SEZ, EPZ, we're giving them lower and lower tariffs to try and spur them to work more. We are also expanding this assistance to SMEs. As you've seen, the government today, as even under His Excellency President William Samoei Ruto, we have a Ministry of SME. With this ministry, we are going to support more and more empowerment of entrepreneurs and the youth to start production and produce more of the items that we consume. I like your initial question that, most of what we're talking about could really be considered SME by global standards. But at the same time, most of what we consume is actually produced by SMEs in other countries. We need first to work on producing for ourselves here, expanding that footprint, and then growing it in the various areas. For example, once we have started producing an item A, we then start looking at its quality, at its efficiency. If it's a food item, we look at its hygiene and phytosanitary conditions, and then we standardize. At the end, we get all this created base and standardize it so that they are able to compete globally. But even if we are going to sell or consume those products locally, we must make them to standard so that as a common use facility, we can produce for Kenya and for anybody else anywhere in the world.
But I mean, look, it's good to have cottage industries, but do we have in place a proper strategy of ensuring that even our cottage industries, they grow to become big brands? Because when you talk about the industrialized nations in the world, I mean, you can mention the number of large manufacturers. When you talk about the United States, you're talking about the Teslas of this world, you're talking about General Motors, you're talking about the Kellogg's of this life. In Japan, you're talking about Toshiba, Mitsubishi, Toyota, and so much. Are we looking at a position where we can also say that we want to grow our companies from these to the Toshibas of this life, to the Mitsubishis of this life?
Buy Kenya, build Kenya is my short answer. Because I don't think Toyota was started to serve America. Toyota was started to serve Japan. It grew up from almost a wagon car to now every other car ahead of you is a Toyota. And I think under the same Buy Kenya, build Kenya, if the right support is given, if the right knowledge base is sold to the public, if the Kenyans understand this and rally behind the Kenyan products, we can reach there. We're not a small country, neither are we a small economy, all things considered. We are a middle-sized economy. And with that, we can make industries that are compatible with our needs and our demands. And from there, we can then become part of suppliers. And then there is another phenomenon that has taken up the world today. Unlike the old days when countries had these mega production facilities that serviced A to Z of any item, today there is a lot of collaboration. You'll find something is designed in the US, portions of it are made in Japan, others in China, others somewhere else, and then there's an assembly in a third country. You go to other places like Colombia, you will find that they have perfected themselves in the after-sales service of, let's say, even military wear. These are the kind of policies we are putting in place in Kenya so that, for example, under textile, Kenya is a major player. Whichever way you look at it, for instance, at the EPZ here, we produce for almost every store in the United States and in many other parts of the world. We need to be able to do that for several other products besides textile. We need to be able to participate in the automotive industry. Kenya in ICT is a mega country it's very advanced. We should be able to convert that capacity, the wealth we have in our youth and that knowledge base, we need to be able to translate it to become an industrial contributor of a portion of a major global consumable.
Let's talk about, the incentives that you have put in place, and this is something that you are talking about. What incentives are you offering to global investors? Because look, I mean, Kenya is not isolated in its search for investors. It is competing with more than 190 countries in the world.
Yes. The level of incentives vary. For example, in the agricultural sector, we want people who are going to bring us technologies that help with storage, with collection, with value addition of one type or another, and even with packaging and handling. When you come into that value chain, then the assessment is which intervention are you bringing? If you consider that we lose about 30% of our harvest to after-harvest handling, then incentives are packaged today to try and establish those cold storage facilities, those dryers, and other preservations, including packaging and transportation. Other kinds of incentives that are given include land, include lower power tariffs, include exemptions from certain types of duties, and also allowance for them to bring in the kind of skills that they need here so that we're able to train a larger cadre of Kenyan experts.
Mm-hmm. Is our incentives, strategy working for us?
It has in the large part. Initially, there was that fear that you will give all these incentives to people, and when the incentive period is over, they will exit. But when you look at the level of investment that goes with some of these incentives, it wouldn't make sense for somebody to put in 1 billion shillings. You get incentives for 3 billion, and then you leave the incentive after 2 years when you could have made 10 billion going down. So I'm not worried about people running away or our incentive not working. I'm more interested in seeing more and more incentives put there, but in a more targeted way. For example, I would want us to put together the areas as we are doing now under the mapping exercise that's ongoing, where we go to every county and establish what are the 5 or 10 most available raw materials. And we take those raw materials and we do an analysis. Do we need a value addition? Do we need a collection center or an aggregation? Or do we actually need to process it completely? And based on those decisions, then we bring in the incentive that we need so that we attract the investor for that particular aspect. The same with all other sectors. I think we need to re-strategize so that we focus on who we want. We don't just say we have these incentives, come and invest. No, we say we have this area of need. These are the incentives we are going to put in, and we want company X here. So we go to them, present to them, and say, please, we would like you to come to Kenya and produce this and this product, and to help you do that, we are willing to offer these incentives.
Very well. And, when you look at Kenya, and we have segmented ourselves, into 47 mini-governments, what efforts have we put in place, or what measures have we put in place to ensure that these 47 counties, they become engines of growth, they become centers of industrialization?
The database that we are putting together through the One Village, One Product exercise and other support systems within the State Department are all geared towards having that one database that helps us see which are the mini governments that can be combined or that can stand a factory or an industry on their own of one kind or another. We are also basing that decision, that policy on science. We are moving more away from that politically driven decision where we would just say, oh, because it's Kirimi's region, we're going to put this what Kirimi wants. No, we are actually scientifically doing that. Yes, it may be Kirimi's place, but does it have the right set of needs? Does it have the conditions necessary for that? And is it the most optimal for the country? And can it be combined with somebody else, either near there, so that it produces more? So to me, the solution lies in science, lies in knowledge-based policy making, which will only be attained from us going out there and scientifically outlining, analyzing, saying this is what exists here, this is what can be brought from here, and this is what can be done.
The proposal is to have the Dongokundu East SEZ as well as the Naivasha one. Where are we in terms of implementation and operationalization of these two special economic zones?
The special economic zones of Dongokundu and Naivasha have reached an advanced level. If you take, for example, Dongokundu, Dongokundu is become a big attraction, especially with the support of the Japanese government. And with it comes in the green energy, which allows us then to be a major player. If we conclude that, which I believe we should in the next short while, because we've already started, the roads are in place, the master plan for the entire land is in place, KPA and Special Economic Zone Authorities, EZA, have all agreed. The government has gone ahead and agreed on what needs to be done when, first where, second where, they have the first and second and third phase. We have also agreed on relocation of people, and all this has already started. I believe that Dongokundu will be a mega engine to our industrialization in the next decade. At the same time, when you look at a place like Naivasha, we have managed to bring in the railway, SGR, all the way to Naivasha. This creates a new opportunity for us to be able to produce even things that would otherwise demand production either near the coast because of transport costs. Now it is a lot easier. We are also able to produce for onward markets into Uganda, South Sudan, Congo now, Rwanda, Burundi, Western Kenya. All those parts of our country will benefit greatly from what is happening at the Special Economic Zone of Naivasha. The other thing that I would say about the Special Economic Zones is that as is now, we have established the master plans. We have agreed on what are the main attractions for this. And our biggest advantage as a country, especially for Naivasha, is green energy. We are 100% green. And that is a big thing for the world because of the climate issues. And Kenya is continued to be a leader again in that aspect.
And talking about Naivasha, I know sometimes in 2015, 2016, the government announced that a set of investors were willing to invest in the production of textile, among other products, in Naivasha SEZ. We haven't heard much about that. What became of that plan?
We have quite a number of people, especially now from Sri Lanka, from India, from China, who have come and agreed, and they are still negotiating with SEZ to see with CESA to see how best to relocate to Kenya, and especially to Naivasha. The one aspect that is holding back the process is the affluent treatment plant, which now is being negotiated with different countries to see who are the investors that would put this there, because with that and the green energy, then Kenya would be one of the most attractive textile centers in the world. And it is still active, and I believe that we are going to see it happening in government. We believe very strongly, and we are working very hard to make sure that we complete this in the very, very near future, so that these big mega textile investors can come in.
You know, as one of the top policymakers in this ministry, from where you see it, what would you say is the biggest opportunity that we have as a country in our quest to become an industrialized nation, and what are the challenges?
Our biggest advantage is really we are a tropical country. We are also a very peaceful country. We are a very good, well-respected capitalist country. And our markets, our policies towards investment are very clear and very competitive. We are a very active players within the international arena with MEGA and the other World Bank and IMF and all international institutions being part of what we do. Kenya is respected out there in terms of how we manage our economy. That is attractive to industry. At the same time, we have a natural resource that is very advantageous. You look at geothermal, you look at the rivers, you look at the weather, all those things add up to create a good base for production. Our geopolitical position in the world, we sit almost at the center of west and east. We can take products either direction with a lot of ease, and our access to the Indian Ocean gives us that advantage. Our biggest disadvantage or our biggest challenge is we have not done enough study of what is available so that our policy is strong enough to answer to those challenges. Some of the policies that we have made in the past have not been strongly based on any expansive study. Mm-hmm. And I think if we go out now, study our country, have at a click of a button, you should be able, without even asking anyone, to tell exactly where one product is found, how far from the highway, how far from the biggest storage system, how far from this or another consideration that you may have. We should also be at a position, and this is a process. It will not happen in one day, but it is being worked on. I think we should be at a position where our pitches to the world should be based on bankable products. We need to stop saying generically that, oh, Kenya is a good destination for investment, and start saying we want people to come and build an X factory for production of X. If you look at our advantage of youth, we are 75% youth country. Yeah, why can't we then focus on creating things that utilize that as a resource? Lastly, I think our biggest advantage of having this youth and these opportunities is that we are able to go to anyone and tell them, listen, we'll produce for you. We will be able to give you the right set of skills because Kenya is a very well-educated country.
Asante sana, Ambassador, for joining us and, of course, for sharing with us your insight.
As always, it's all my pleasure.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Asante sana. Well, this week we have been conversing around the industrialization agenda, and the fact of the matter is we do not have a single study case of a country that became developed without investing in industrialization, and Kenya is not to become an exception, and that's why we need to deepen industrialization in Kenya. We need to create a conducive environment for investors who come and invest here, as well as create robust industrialization strategies to attract more industrialists. Well, you're watching Inside Government. Thank you very much for your time. Until next Friday, enjoy the rest of your afternoon.